Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagano, and welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled episode of Iowa's most fantastic conservative podcast. I'm back here in studio with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstead, and we've got another fantastic show for you today. The most exciting thing about today's show is that there is no construction equipment out here outside the window of the studio. Apparently, the biggest part of the construction is done. We still have no idea what it is they've actually built out here, but there's a lot of concrete that's been laid, and it's a wonderful something that they have built out here. John, you got any guesses?
Oh, it looks nice. I think we need a ITR grill out there.
It will be your truck going to get it, you understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
We think it might be some sort of like patio for a grill and some picnic tables. I don't know. There's something else behind the scenes there. That there's some sort of secret purpose for this installation that we can't quite figure out. But my idea was the drive-in theater and Spies Like Us, but I don't. But no one agrees with me.
You need a Pepsi, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, last time we were here, do you have any 80s movies references for us?
Exclusively.
Okay.
Exclusively.
In the pre-production meeting, we were talking about Max Headroom. So
Max Headroom and Ghostbusters.
Yes. Did you know that the final scene of Ghostbusters, the building that like the Marshmallow Man is on top of, is actually in St. Louis?
No.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, it's right there in the square by the big cathedral there in St. Louis. You see it and you're like, oh, yeah, that's totally it. But you think it's kind of got like a New York City vibe to it, but it's not. It's in St. Louis.
There's an argument that Ghostbusters is actually one of the best free market movies because of the storyline.
Oh, tell me,
I
John.
mean, it's a group of entrepreneurs that form an organization to catch ghosts, and they make it profitable without government interference or subsidy.
So simply people starting a business that's profitable with no government interference makes it one of the best movies of all time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly makes it unique.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've had enough fun now. We need to get...
And they get shut down by the EPA.
Yeah. Well, we need to stop having fun now and talk about data and tax policy.
Oh.
Okay. Anyway. I wanted to touch again on some of our poll results. So we went through this briefly in our last episode, but there is a couple of numbers in here that I wanted to focus on. And ITR Foundation recently had a summary of this in a piece, and we put together a one-page flyer on it, and all of which you can find at
itrfoundation.org.
Wonderful. But this whole idea, because we spent so much time talking about property taxes and local government spending, we asked the question, to control the growth of property taxes, do you support or oppose the state General Assembly setting limits on how much a local government can tax and spend? So this is that basic question of locals would always preach local control. We should be able to tax however much we want, but no, the state legislature has a role to play in that as well. Do you support the state legislature putting limits on local government? And that was a 67% of Iowans, 2/3 of them support that proposition, and only 17% oppose that.
Yep.
So only 17% of Iowans are buying into that argument from your local city councilman that, no, this is local control, right? Mm-hmm. That's a plus 50. That's a huge number. There are very few things in politics that rise that level. It's not quite up to Urbandale Recreation Complex levels, but it's up there. So, and I mean, maybe I should let you guys talk since I actually asked you to stop what you're doing and come in here and record a podcast. But it breaks across the partisan spectrum too, right?
Yep.
So
property taxes are a problem. Objective data shows how much they've grown. Okay. And you can take all the anecdotal evidence you want of people who don't like paying their property tax bill that keeps growing and growing and growing. There is a solution the legislature could implement if they wanted to that would be wildly popular with the public. that would also get right to the root of the problem. And keep in mind, the root of the problem is not the assessor or the assessment. That's part of the math that goes into your bill, but that is not the problem. The problem is how much local governments are choosing to take from you in taxes and turn around and spend. If we limit their ability to take so much and spend so much, that would rein in the growth of your property tax bill. The legislature could act upon that and deliver a solution that would be popular and address the problem. As yet, I haven't seen a solution like that proposed in either chamber, at least not quite like that. So,
the solution is simply local governments need to spend less, period.
yes.
Through whatever mechanism, through whatever restriction, they just need to spend less money.
I would argue the restriction should be the most direct one that just says you need to spend less, not trying to backdoor through capping or limiting or shifting something else behind the scenes.
One thing
go ahead, John.
One thing I want to add is that I thought our poll was very interesting in showing the bipartisan support for this, but also, people often think of a spending limit as some radical idea, but if we look at some other states that have done this, New York comes to mind, and New York is not known as a conservative right-wing state and very much not a tax-friendly state. But one thing that they did do is they have basically a budget cap, budget spending limit on property taxes, and basically that has saved taxpayers a lot of money, and it has not deprived these communities in New York of any necessities. And so this is not some radical idea. It's actually a very common sense, taxpayer friendly idea that has proven to work. And so I think if blue New York can do it, red Iowa can do it as well.
We like to get these proposals and this data out to policymakers, to legislators, because ultimately they have to answer these political questions. And going back to this breakdown across partisan lines, on this poll question, 79% of Republicans support that proposition. 70% of independents do. And even a plurality at 46% of Democrats. This is a political winner to enact these sorts of reforms and restrictions to rein in local government spending.
It would also work.
Yes.
With, I believe, the least amount of collateral damage or unintended consequences.
And I think, going back to your point too, Chris, about assessments and rollback, and we have spent a lot of time trying to unpack all of that here, and we should understand it. I was at an event this week and spoke to a group, and the question came up. There had been a county supervisor and talking about some of these formulas, and one person in the audience said, well, how do I know you're telling me I should go to my city council meeting or my county supervisor and talk about how I want property taxes, but I don't understand all these formulas. I can't have that conversation with them. And my point to that audience was, don't go in there and try and argue their budget, because they understand it better than you do. And don't go in there and argue a complicated property tax funding formula. You need to contact your local government and your legislator and say, my budget is what matters. It's not the city's budget or the county budget. It's my budget, and I'm tired of spending it. And that is an important part of this that we need to remember as well, because Iowans are mad. Good. Couple other poll questions. We had
all the poll questions are good.
They're all good.
They're all good. Everybody should look at them.
Right track, wrong track. I think we talked on that. Just how Iowans instinctively understand that the country is definitely off on the wrong track. That's a 74-19 proposition, but a plurality of Iowans also say they believe the state is going in the right direction. So I think that's important as we make the case that we want the rest of the country to operate a whole lot more like Iowa does.
Yep.
One thing that's interesting is that, and I don't know if you both addressed this from the Monday's podcast when you talked about the poll.
Well, had you shown back up, you would have known, John.
Yeah.
Or had you listened to the episode?
I did listen, but
okay.
I don't recall if this was mentioned. But this morning the Consumer Price Index came out and showed once again that we're still struggling with inflation. And if we looked at part of the survey that we did on the top two issues that Iowans are concerned with, the first, inflation and cost of living, and then second, taxes and government spending, which go together. We saw today that inflation is roughly 5%. Core inflation is a little bit higher, and people are still struggling. We still see gas prices high, food prices high. Inflation since President Biden has been in office has roughly been 15% higher than when he took office. So these are serious issues that Iowans are struggling with, and this poll reflected that as well. That wages have gone down close to 4% because of inflation, and that's inflation, they say, is the cruelest tax because it eats your wages, it eats your savings away, and so Iowans are understanding that these economic fiscal issues are front and center on their minds.
I'm glad you brought that up, John, because I wanted to come to you today, and you had a really good piece that you co-authored that ended up in the Cedar Rapids Gazette that talked about the President Biden's budget and these policies. And I think that all sort of fits together with what you're saying right now. But share a little bit about what was in that piece.
Yes, well, I co-wrote this with our friend Matt Everson, who's the state director for NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses, and we wanted to address basically the president's budget proposal, which came out a few weeks ago. He wants to spend close to $7 billion, and it also will.
There's a lot more than billion.
I'm sorry. Yes, close to $7 trillion.
Trillion here,
trillion there. Yeah. And in the process, it would increase taxes by close to $5 trillion, and a lot of those taxes would be basically a reversal from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which had been passed in the Trump administration. And if listeners recall, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was very successful. I mean, it was one of the largest tax cuts in our national history, and it did wonders for not only just middle and lower class taxpayers, but also for small business owners. And even in Iowa, we saw numerous stories of small businesses that expanded, hired new workers, gave bonuses, and prospered as a result of the tax cuts. And we also know because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that also spurred Iowa to start cutting our income tax rates. So, but now what's happening is part of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to expire in a year or so. And so what Matt and I wrote about was that, one, the president's budget is harmful to small businesses because of those tax increases. And the second part is that basically that, the right policy for Congress should do is to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent and not raise taxes, because small businesses are one of the major employers in Iowa. And so if you hurt small businesses, you're going to hurt working class Iowans, and it's just going to be another drag on the economy.
And frankly,
by
John,
doing this,
when you start taxing business, period, whether it be small business or large corporations, I mean, those organizations, they're an organization. It's not a person. They've got to turn around and get that money somewhere. Those sort of things will be passed on to the consumer. You're only going to double down on the pain of inflation and everything else. Not to mention the detrimental, all of it, John.
And even, people don't like when we talk about corporate tax relief, but, high corporate taxes get passed on to the consumer. So you're absolutely right. And so this budget is very dangerous. It's poor policy. It's only going to drive, deeper into inflation and increase the national debt. And so it's just we felt we needed to respond to that.
When was the last time President Biden actually had to worry about a budget in the private sector? When was the last time you had any experience trying to make a payroll or meet consumer demand?
Probably never.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
This
It
just
shows. It shows.
It all goes back to this idea that the federal government and things in this country are heading down the wrong track, and this is just more of the same. And you guys made the point in the article, John, that we need to operate more like what's happening in Iowa, of fiscal restraint and cutting taxes and freeing the private sector up from government regulation, because that's working in Iowa.
Yeah. And that's what's so frustrating about this property tax debate, because you would think that elected officials, especially local Republican elected officials, would understand that what Governor Reynolds and the legislature have done in terms of controlling their spending and lowering taxes would be something they could do at their level and extend. And in response to that, they just want to spend more. They try to scare people by saying that
they want to. John, I'm sorry to interrupt. I am, but like, in fairness, they want to spend more, but they also want to ban cutting the grass until June.
Yeah, I mean, it's just utter nonsense.
But that's what Des Moines is coming out with.
Yeah.
Right. Proclamation: don't cut the grass until June.
Okay. Yeah, that according to Channel 8.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
Yeah. But you know, the heart of high taxation is government spending, regardless if we're talking about income or property taxes, and so you know that whether it's at the federal, state, or local level, and you have to control spending.
I think one of the, and I don't know if I've made this point before, but fiscal discipline is hard work. It's really easy to sit here and say you should spend less money, and they should, but to go in and decide picking this is essential, this is not, this is a want, and this is a need, that's hard work, especially politically, to go in. And it can be hard work at a local level to tell some of your city employees, no, we can't hire someone else this year. We're going to wait a year on that. We can't build this new thing that probably would be very helpful for you in your job, but we don't have the resources for that this year. To argue with your public works director or your police chief or your fire chief, like we're not saying that every line item in those city budgets is not somehow worthwhile. We're saying is they need to do a much better job of separating the wants and the needs and prioritizing spending, like state government has done. State government has grown at roughly 2% a year over the past several years, and they've got very similar demands on their budget. But local government budgets continue to grow 6, 8, 10% a year. The evidence is that there is room for local governments to make these sort of prioritizing spending decisions, and they're not.
Which is why the legislature needs to put some tighter bands around their ability to spend.
If they can't fix it themselves, then the state legislature will do it for them, and I hope that they do.
What the people want.
That's right. Give them what they want. All right, gentlemen, I think we've about covered it for today. I appreciate it. Appreciate the insight on all these issues, and folks out there, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share and all that. But take a look at the ITR Foundation Poll. There's a lot of great information in there, and a lot of things that can be useful for policymakers, can be shared. But I got John laughing at the end today.
We've never had John laughing taking us out.
I don't know what I did. That makes me a little self-conscious.
You reminded me.
I thought I had it all wrapped up, John.
You reminded me of Ghostbusters and just local government is like that green Slimer thing that just is consuming everything.
So just let John's imagination run wild. That's how we get it done around here. All right. Anyway, with that having been said, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to tell all your friends. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.